Hello there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I'm going to be sharing 3 projects that I made with Simon Says Stamp's Be Happy card kits, the September 2023 card kit. And this kit, if you like florals and bees, this is totally up your alley because this is a really fun kit with some really cool products. I'm going to be sharing how I made the cards that I made with the kit, and we're going to start off first by creating this one here. I utilized pattern paper and some of the die cut elements that are included, as well as a brand new Hello die. To start off with, I'm taking one of the 6x6 pattern paper sheets that are included in the kit, and I'm going to trim this down to be 4x6 inches. You'll notice we have a little piece left over. Set that aside and save it because we're going to make something with it later. I'm making this into a 5x7 card, so I did cut a piece of paper down to be 7x10 inches. I'll score it at 5 and then go ahead and fold it over and burnish the edge with my bone folder to give myself a really nice crease. This paper is Simon Says Stamp 120 pound white. It's a good base for card bases, and you can see the nice border we're going to get around this beautiful pattern paper sheet. With the Simply Hello die that's included in the kit, it's both a die and a shadow layer. I'm going to cut the Hello out of some Simon Says Stamp black glossy cardstock that you get in the kit, and then also the shadow layer from white cardstock. I am going to cut one more of those Hello dies with just some black cardstock so that I can layer it behind the glossy one and stack the two together to get a slightly more dimensional greeting. I'm poking out the little inner pieces with my Simon Says Stamp Place and Pierce tool, and then I'll go ahead and glue these together with some craft tacky glue. So here's that other piece that I die cut from just some plain black cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and pick this up with my tweezers and go ahead and layer them together to adhere them. And this will be slightly dimensional off of our shadow layers. So it's going to give the sentiment a little bit more oomph. On the back side of that stacked layer, I'm going to put a little bit more adhesive, and then I will stick this down to the shadow layer. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue for this because this is a really nice strong adhesive and it will dry clear. So if you have anything that might be oozing out the sides, you'll never see it. So this is going to get centered up onto my card along with some of these die cut bees that are included in the kit. But we first need to pop this up onto our card. And to do that, I'm going to use a sheet of Simon Says Stamp white foam. This foam is die cuttable, so if you want to be able to use this with die cuts, it's great for that. Not all foams can be die cut, this one can. And it's also really good for putting behind panels that you want to pop up, which cuts down on the use of the amount of foam tape you need. And especially for something like a piece of pattern paper that's a little thinner, it gives it some stability. So I use Terrific tape from Simon Says Stamp to adhere this to my pattern paper, and then I will put more tape on the back side of that to glue it down onto my card base. So now we have our card panel adhered to the base, and we're ready to start adding our additional elements. That includes my little sentiment that I'm going to use a small piece of foam tape to attach down to around the middle area of that card. And then once I have that adhered, I'll take some thin 3D foam squares that are included in the kit and adhere my little bees around the flowers and sentiments. I also glued some of these boiled sugar droplets from Trinity stamps around my card. These aren't part of the kit, but these are a great staple for all sorts of different cards. And I'm going to add these in a little bit of a trail following the bees. I'm using my Place and Score tool from Simon Says Stamp to adhere those down, and I use glossy accents for the adhesive. So remember that little piece we had left over? Well, I'm going to make a coordinating tag to go with my card. I'm taking this little tag die from Simon Says Stamp, and I'll trim this down inside of my die cut machine. That's going to leave me with this cute little sunflower centered onto my tag. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach one of those little bees from that same die cut collection from Paper Rose that's in the kit to put down along the bottom. And I used a little foam square for that too. Now the back side of this is pattern, and if I want to be able to write something on the back, I'm going to need something that's going to give me something a little bit less pattern for me to be able to write on. So I die cut another piece of pattern paper from that same tag, and I'm just going to glue this to the back side. So now I'll end up with this nice clean area for me to write a nice little message to the recipient when I attach this to a gift. So using a craft glue stick from Simon Says Stamp, I just put a little adhesive onto my tag and I'll stick the two pieces together. This also makes the tag a little bit more sturdy, which is nice. I'm going to put a velvet trim from Holtz through that hole I'll trim this down with my Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Everyday Scissors, and then I tied the ribbon onto my tag using some twine. I love mixing ribbons and twines together. It really adds a nice little touch to your tag. It's a little bit more fancy, which I think is fun. So I'll just tie this into a nice little bow, and we have now this cute little tag that looks so adorable with our card. This technique could be done with any type of pattern paper scene sheets. A lot of times in pattern paper packs, you'll get these really cool sheets that have a little border scene or something on them, and they're fantastic for making cards like this. So check around in your stash and see what you have. You could probably recreate this card with things you already own. All right, I'm gonna share now a little bit of stamping and ephemera. This card is kind of a little bit inspired by mixed media, and I also actually used a new product from Holtz when I made this card. So first what I did was I took these 2 bee images from the stamp set, and I want to stamp them behind some of these ephemera pieces that are included in the kit. These are those die cut elements that I was using for the bees. There's all sorts of cute sunflowers and bee themed elements, so I thought it would be fun to make a grouping of them on my card and have some bees stamped behind it. So using some Simon Says Stamp black ink, I'm going to stamp a total of 3 bees onto this Nina Desert Storm cardstock. This cardstock is quite a bit smaller than an A2 size card. I want to say it was 3.5 by 5. So what I'm shaking up here right now is the new Fallen Acorn Mica stain from Holtz. This just came out. It's part of his fall Halloween collection. It's going to dry in this really nice brown color, which looks really good with the paper and the bees, and I splattered that onto my card. Then I'm going to use foam tape to attach my little die cut elements onto my card. I used both regular foam tape and thin 3D foam squares to do this, so I get some different heights. Now this isn't part of the kit, but these cute metal charms from Prima are just so adorable. I have some of them in my stash, and I thought it would be cute to put this little bee on top of the wax seal. So I used red line tape. This is great for adhering anything unique to your project, such as wood, metal, etc. And so I'm going to put a thin piece of that behind my bee and then attach it down on top of my little seal. And that looks so cool. This holds really well. It's not going to fall off, and it will make it a little bit bulky. So if you were going to mail this card, you definitely would want to put it in a padded envelope. But I think it's just so cool. On the back side of that piece, I'm going to put a couple strips of terrific tape and then adhere this panel onto some matte gold cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. This is just going to be a really thin border around my panel, but it adds a nice touch of gold. With the new crisscross floral embossing folder from the kit, I'm going to emboss this sheet of white cardstock. This is going to be my base. So my bee panel is going to get adhered to the center of that card panel, and I love how that crisscross floral looks so neat to add some really cool texture behind this card. Continuing with that bee theme, I'm going to use the sentiment that says, "Don't worry, be happy," and I'm going to emboss this onto black cardstock. So I prepped the surface with my Simon Says Stamp powder tool, and now I'm going to stamp this greeting down with embossing ink from Simon. I will use some gold embossing powder for this. Usually I use white, but I thought I would pull in more of that gold. So I'm going to go ahead and emboss that in gold, and using my heat tool, I'll just go ahead and set this. I am using my Simon Says Stamp embossing clothespins to help hold my paper and keep my fingers from getting burned while I emboss it. And then I'll use my scissors to trim this down. There are coordinating dies available for this stamp set. I just don't have them, so I'm just going to trim out this greeting with some scissors. Once I have that greeting trimmed down, then I'll go ahead and attach it onto my card project using some foam tape. And I'll just center that down along the bottom of the card. How cute is this? I love how these elements all combine together to create a really unique look, and that little charm is just too cute. Finally, I'm going to create a card with the stencil set that's included. These stencils are layering stencils, so you get a total of 4 pieces that make a really pretty floral scene. And we're going to use our stamp and stencil mat from Simon Says Stamp to hold both my paper and also the stencils in place. This is really nice for stenciling, especially stencil layering, because you can line up your paper in the center of the mat, and then each of your stencils you'll line up inside of that black square to keep them all in the same exact place. So when you're all done, your stenciling will be perfectly aligned. What you're seeing me do is I ink blended just a base color of the flowers with some lemonade, and then I brought in a detail blending brush from Simon Says Stamp and some citrine ink, and I'm only going to ink blend along the tops of the petals, kind of fading that out as it goes towards the bottom. And that's because I want to make these petals look shaded, and I actually did a lot of shading across all of my stencil layers. So here are the flowers, and then we're going to bring in the slightly smaller flowers and do that layer in some purples. So I picked out Morning and Galaxy. Morning is the first color that I'm using, and I'm using a detail blending brush to ink blend these flowers. And then I brought in Galaxy for the slightly darker shading, which looks really neat. It adds some interest to the flowers. They're not all one flat color, which I think is fun. I'm also going to use that same Morning color to color in the centers of the purple flowers, and then we'll switch to orange for the other flowers, which kind of look like a cross between sunflowers and coneflowers, but I think it could be anything you want. So I used Galaxy for the smaller flowers, and then I brought in Melon and Sherbet for the coloring on the larger flowers, and I did a shading on that as well. So Melon was the lightest, and then Sherbet is the darker color. So once I have the florals colored, now we're ready to move on to the stems and leaves. So this layer, I actually picked out 2 colors of green. I used Fairway to start, which is going to give me a really nice base layer of green. It's a good mid-tone color. And then once I have that applied, I'll bring in a slightly smaller blending brush. Again, one of the detail round brushes, and I used Field for the darker color. So that gives me some nice contrast on these stems and leaves. So we removed our last stencil. Our pattern is complete, looks so cool. You'll bend the stamp and stencil mat in half to help pop your paper off of the mat. Don't worry, that won't hurt your mat. And now we can go ahead and adhere this card panel onto some gold cardstock, which is going to give me a really nice border, just like I did for the bee card that we just made. And I did cut this floral panel down to be 4 by 5 1/4. On the back side of this paper, I am going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue stick so I can adhere it down onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card made from Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. I thought that color was nice and warm. It would go well with the colors that I chose. And then my greeting is going to get stamped with embossing ink and then embossed with gold embossing powder. But the fun part is that I wanted this to match the purple color that I used in the florals. But because I don't have a paper color that's exact match to that, I thought I'd make one. So we're going to do an emboss resist. So once I heat set this embossed greeting and we have it cooled down, I'm going to actually ink blend over top of it. So I'm going to use the background blending brush that's part of the kit, and I'm going to ink blend over top of this greeting. And the embossing is going to actually resist all this ink that I'm putting on top. I'll just buff it off when I'm all done, and we have this really nice purple cardstock now that looks really pretty with the gold embossing. And so now when I adhere this down onto my project, it's going to perfectly match those florals. I did trim this down with my mini trimmer from Holtz, and then I colored the edges of the paper so you can't see that white core by just tapping the sentiment into that same ink pad that I used, which was Galaxy. So I'll pop my sentiment up along the bottom of the card, and then finally I tied a bit of twine around the bottom to just give it a nice soft touch. I always try to wrap my twine a couple times around my project. It makes it stand out a little bit because this twine is a little bit on the thinner side, and I think it has more of a natural touch too. So very fun. I love the little touches of gold that peek out from the sentiment and also the trim around the card panel. And that's gonna do it. So there we have it, 3 cards and even a bonus tag that I made with the September 2023 card kit from Simon Says Stamp called Be Happy. If you're interested in the kit, I do have it linked below in the video description, as well as on my blog, along with still pictures of all the cards. You can see everything there, so check out the links if you're on YouTube, or if you're on my blog, scroll down, you can see more information. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I can't wait to come back and share more inspiration with you. But until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.